Welcome to episode 230 of Nugget's Dungeon Terrain. I won't say it's long awaited, but I will say it's been a long time. The reason why is because I've just finished my 5th book, Steampunk Saga. I'm particularly proud of this one, and it's coming out soon on Kickstarter. Be sure to check the links in the description below. Here's some of the details for the game. In this episode I'll be creating some scatter terrain for this steampunk game. Because it's mini and terrain agnostic, it means that you could use flat dungeon tiles, as I'm going to in this example, to give it a little bit of life and lift, a little bit of 3D. It's cool to be able to add a few pieces of scatter. Everything that you see here comes out of the junk drawer. This furnace, for example, has two main components. The flywheel from a water pump, and a party popper. I'm using two grommets, one for the large hole, one for the top of the pipe, and then I place a flat blank shield over the large grommet to make it look like a faceplate for the furnace. Little details matter. It gives you something extra to paint, and you don't want surfaces left behind. But I'm not going to add too much because this is going to be scanned and turned into STLs, which I'll be adding to the campaign. These are the two main parts that will make up the next piece. This will be a scientist test station, maybe a galvanist trying out electricity. You'll see later I did away with the black pipe on the left. One chimney was enough. Scrap plays a big part in Steampunk Saga. There are scrap tokens, along with chemistry tokens and crystals. This is a vat in which different pieces of junk is thrown into and turned into scrap parts. The blank leftovers were filled with small pieces of gravel. And finally a steam-powered machine that has some clockwork components. Most of the cogs that you see here are ripped out of an old DVD player that I tore apart. These are the two main colours that I used, and here are all of the colours that made up the base coats for all of these different pieces. Other than a black undercoat, everything is basically just painted with one colour at this stage. Then I go over with a black ink with plenty of wash in it and cover most of the surfaces. In the Victorian era, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing. Things were dirty and grimy. Lots of pollution, pretty disgusting. So even though these machines might be fairly new and shiny, I'm going to dirty them up by adding this crushed chalk pastel. Any brush will work, and in past episodes you've seen me just use a cheap brush and maybe a small scoop to push some of the powder in. But here I'm using a makeup brush. It definitely holds the powder a lot easier. Underneath the mouth of this furnace I am putting lots of blacks and greys to try and look like a build-up of soot. You can see what I'm doing, but probably not close enough to see the results. I'm getting some dark chalk pastels and dabbing it around the top of this chimney to make it look like there's a residue build-up of smoke and soot. Patina effects could not be easier than crushing up a bit of this teal/turquoise type of chalk and then dabbing it onto some random areas. This terrain is handy. It has two effects. It's a raised area, which gives you a tactical advantage in the game, and it can also be used to link to another area lower down, having the heroes opening up the hatch. Where you apply the ink can potentially create some fairly sharp borders, with dark and light areas too clearly defined. So adding lots of different kinds of chalk over those two areas helps to break it up a little bit and makes it look a little bit more gritty and realistic. I considered putting something on that final large cog. It's got a nice slot where I could have added something, but because I want it to be used in a variety of situations, I haven't added that at this point. Let's see this in context and get an idea of what a little bit of 3D scatter terrain can do. Here's a nice chunky tile from Smog, The Rise of Moloch. And here are three characters, the occultist, the gunslinger and the chemist, fighting some automatons. Throw in a couple of pieces of scatter terrain and now you have a slight bottleneck where the enemy are trying to feed through and the party can plan their strategy a little bit differently. Here the gunslinger is using this machine for a little bit of cover. The terrain will also reduce the number of enemy that can get to him. The occultist is surrounded and separated, but at least he has high ground, which will give him a bonus and the enemy a modifier. And a large terrain piece right smack bang in the middle of the room creates some line of sight challenges and makes heroes decide whether they're going to go left or right. Here's another look at those final pieces. Thanks for watching and don't forget to check out the link to the Kickstarter campaign.